Nurah Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nurah Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nurah Muhammad, and I'm so happy to be back. And I did take a brief hiatus from the podcast because I had some figuring out to do, if you will, and I know some people have been asking and wondering when the next episode is going to drop and be available. But I do want to explain the time that I took away from the podcast, and I'll say that for probably about a year, maybe even a little longer, even though this podcast is still not even 5 years old. I took this hiatus because I felt like there has been something missing, and I really couldn't put my finger on it for quite a while, and I really took time away from the podcast to try to explore and identify where my dissatisfaction lies. And so one of the things that kind of had been nagging at me is, I'm happy to have this podcast, and I'm grateful to have an audience to want to listen and consume the information that I share here on the podcast and that's shared by guests. However, for me, I think it's important that I find a way to bind us, meaning you, the audience, and me as the speaker. And the question that I pose to myself is, what qualifies me to have you as an audience? What is it that I know? What have I done? And I believe I know a little, and I have done a bit. And this podcast is, if you've been listening for a while, or even from the beginning, you know that this podcast is built on the foundation of work that I have been doing in my local community for more than a decade now. And this podcast isn't something that I was seeking to do. It wasn't an idea that I had myself to do a podcast. In fact, it was something I was persuaded to do. I was encouraged to do. I was nudged to do, and I responded. And what those who encouraged me to do this podcast, to launch Nurah Speaks, they said, well, you have a really great message and you need to broaden your audience. And while I've done work locally in the tri-state area where I live, those supporters of mine, those mentors of mine said that it's time that I broaden my audience and more people need to hear what it is that I have to say. And I say that because first I want this to be absolutely clear, is that this podcast is not it isn't for my own ego. It's not for my own edification or my own aggrandizement. I don't seek to aggrandize myself using this podcast. It was something that I was encouraged to do, and after giving it careful consideration, I said, you know what, I agree. I think that what I have to share should be shared with a broader audience. And the work that I do in my community, it's built on the foundation and the success that I've had in the work that I've done. It's the foundation that I have and the success that I have is due to my observance as a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I've mentioned before that I'm a member of the Nation of Islam, and it's important that my audience know who I am. As followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he teaches us that if you're going to read a book, study the author first and get to know the author so that you have a better understanding of who's writing you're reading. So in that same way, I wanted to make sure that my audience knew who I was when I launched the podcast. You know, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a Muslim woman. I work in my community, and it's something that I do with pride. However, one thing that is the strength behind it all is my observance of Islam as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's the key to my success. However, in starting the podcast, I wanted to be very clear that I did not intend to have a religious show. I know that religion can be a turnoff for many of our people, and I really just wanted to have a show that discussed principles that can and will improve outcomes in our communities, our families, our schools. And while I have had that in the show, I've never ever shied away from my faith, but I haven't included the Honorable Elijah Muhammad directly in my show. And there's an episode that I look forward to producing where I talk about more of my history, my experience as a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and how the program has really been instrumental to me personally and to my family, as my children have attended and graduated from the University of Islam. And you've heard both of my children on the podcast in previous episodes. And because I'm just so grateful for what this educational institution did for my children, my family, then I am going to dedicate a show just about that, because what this educational institution does is so dynamic and so pivotal. I want to share it with others who may be interested in finding a different way to educate your child. But, you know, just getting back to this show, my hiatus, and kind of what has been happening for me. So I never really included the messenger, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, directly in the show. And I've had guests who are followers of his. I've had Brother Mandine Muhammad, who hosts Elevated Talk, a radio show that's on WVON in Chicago. I've had our good brother Jamil Muhammad, who is the host of 2 television shows, Muhammad and Friends, and the Munir Muhammad Show, based out of Chicago, and others who are followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But personally, I think that I've shared things from him in a very limited basis. And one, like I said, people have misconceptions of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, certainly, absolutely. And that's not by accident, it's by design, that someone who is and has been so instrumental in fashioning Black pride and Black culture, Black consciousness, it's no accident that he has been demeaned, degraded, and that so many of us have a misconception of him. And I know that just religion can be a turnoff. However, you know, when I thought about it, and when I do workshops and when I'm speaking and when I'm mentoring and doing work in my community, religion never is part of the conversation unless a young person is inquisitive and it comes up in conversation. But what I do is I share principles. I share principles that are universal. When I'm talking with young women and I'm trying to help them understand what self-love looks like, what self-respect looks like. These are principles. They're not, it's not a religious foundation to the message. It's doing good to self, doing good to others. It's having knowledge of yourself, having knowledge of others. And really, this is what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches. He teaches, his message is based in principles. It's based in principles that produce a peaceful lifestyle. That's what Islam is. It's peace. And so I thought, well, wow, all this time I've been trying to shy away from having a show that has any kind of religious context. And perhaps what I have done is really missed an opportunity to share with you, my audience, what has helped me have a strong foundation and have success in the work that I'm doing, because that is springboarded from what I've learned as a Muslim observer of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so what am I going to change moving forward? First, I'm very grateful to kind of have figured out where my dissatisfaction was. I respect my audience. I respect this platform. I respect media and podcasting and what it can do for people to hear something that's beneficial, to hear truth, to hear intelligent discourse and conversation. And while comedy and reality talk and this is not for entertainment. This is for the edification of our community. This is to produce better outcomes. This is a tool that organizations use when they're working with young people to initiate conversations. This is a show that fathers and mothers put on when they're in their car with their children to spark conversation. And so I value this opportunity that I have to engage with you, to have this position in the community and here on the microphone in somewhat of a leadership capacity. And I take that very seriously, and I want to be responsible with that. But as I said, I feel in some ways that I missed the opportunity to share principles and ideas with you that are so beneficial. And specifically, I mean the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And while I'm sharing ideas and thoughts, the root of what I share with you, and if you've been listening for some time, then you can say that, the message that you get from the Nurah Speaks podcast, it does make sense. And where you and I may differ in some areas, you have not found this to be a religious show. I'm sure you've not found this to be a show that seeks to indoctrinate, because I'm certainly not interested in that. I'm not proselytizing. I'm not trying to push my religion or my way of thought. What I do want to do, however, is to make sure I use this opportunity to share thoughts from a man that I know can and will change how we deal with each other, how we think about education, what unity really is, how we can respond to concerns that we have collectively in our local communities, how to raise our sons, raise our daughters, have strong marriages. And so I do not want to be neglectful or incomplete in my obligation to you. And so moving forward, each episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast will include in some form or fashion the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That may be me just reading a quick 3 sentences. Perhaps it may be playing a clip from maybe a speech or an interview that he did. And those words will be transcribed in the show notes so that you can hear them and you can also read them for yourself to reflect on them. And so that is something that you'll find different in the podcast moving forward with this episode 188 and ongoing. And you may say, well, this is not such a radical shift. You took a several week hiatus just to come up with that. But, like I said, I take this very, very seriously. This is, you are not to play with. You're not to toy with. And I respect you and I honor the time that you give me. And so I want to capitalize on having your attention and use it wisely, and always be responsible. And if I want to give you the best of myself, the best that I have to give you is the wisdom from a brilliant Black man that our educational system and our media systems have kept from us, kept the truth of this man and the wisdom that he has shared with us. There's been a very dark curtain that's been put over his teachings, his wisdom, and his character. And so as your sister and a person who loves you and values you, then you will hear from him each and every episode. And so maybe it'll just be a food for thought moment. And so you'll hear from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and then we'll get right into the broadcast. So I just wanted to share that very quickly with you, something that you're going to notice that's different in the podcast. And, I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank you for the time that you lend to me, because there's so much that's clawing for your attention. There's this radio show, that radio show, there's television, there's Netflix, there's Apple TV, Prime Video. I mean, there's so much and there's so many of us who are trying to get your attention. I'm someone who wants to have your attention, and if I have your attention, then I absolutely want to give you the best of me. And so because of that, I cannot exclude that brilliant Black man, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So as we conclude with this episode, I am going to share something from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And, I encourage you to explore what he's taught us, not explore him through the filter and lens that our oppressor has put on him, and not to explore him through those who hate him, how they have twisted and misconstrued his character and his history and his works. Hear from him. And the reason why I say this, as I said, you must know the author when you open the book, and consume the body of the book. Understand the author. And for us to understand the author, then we have to read what the author says about himself. We have to listen to the author's interviews when she speaks in her own words. It's not it's not best to go through someone else's interpretation. Go straight to that person and hear what they have to say, so that we are not deceived or misled by other people's agendas when they're referencing that person. Get to know that person for yourself, and you will be benefited by that. So I encourage you, we've, been encouraged to, learn about Marcus Garvey, certainly Dr. King, Jesse Jackson, Sojourner Truth, and Harriet Tubman, and so others. And there was this great Black man that was right here working on behalf of the Black man and Black woman. And we know little about him, and what we think we know and what we think we understand has been filtered to us, or we got it from, a minister of his, or a former minister of his, or a dissatisfied follower of his. But I encourage you, get it from him. Go straight to him, and do that with everybody, whomever you're studying, whomever you're trying to learn more about, whether it's your political leader, whether it's a religious leader, whether it's a community leader, whether it's your professor. Get to know that person from themselves, and get to know them directly, so that we're not misled by other people's perception. So as I close this episode 188, and it's so good to be back. And, it feels so good when you can solve a problem. And maybe this wasn't the most significant of problems to be solved, but for me, it was certainly a very important one, so that I can be, what's the word we use now? Authentic, so that I could be my authentic self and share the parts of me that I think is best to share with you. And that is what I have learned from this wonderful, wonderful man. And so I'm going to share this quote from you. This comes from his book, Message to the Black Man in America. And I quote, "Love yourself and your kind. Let us refrain from doing evil to each other, and let us love each other as brothers, as we are the same flesh and blood. In this way, you and I will not have any trouble in uniting. It is a fool who does not love himself and his people." Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast, and I look forward to bringing you more. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, nurahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@nurahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nurah Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nurah Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.